Gongorov is a 1973 Scorsese film about a Russian family moving to Italy and trying to get into organized crime to get by. It's a gritty film rivaling the likes of Scarface and Taxi Driver. You haven't seen it because it doesn't exist. In the middle of 2022, Tumblr users began talking about a film called Gongorov, insisting it existed and had just been forgotten to time. But why? Were users confusing movies and filling in the gaps in their memory with their imaginations by accident? This resembles a type of cognitive bias called source confusion, which is when a person remembers an event that didn't actually happen because they heard someone else speak about the event. Their mind corrects the events based on this new information, which then feels like a memory instead of imagination. This is one of the reasons that people who witness crimes or even victims of those crimes can get the details wrong. The mind is really good at telling stories and filling in gaps in knowledge with assumptions or suggestions. Like other cognitive biases, source confusion is even more convincing when there is something real or true to latch onto. In this case, there really was a Mafia movie released in the 70s by an iconic director. It was The Godfather, released in 1972 and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It probably wouldn't take much to convince someone who had seen The Godfather, or at least knew about it, that Scorsese shortly after released a mob film of his own to capitalize on the interest, or just one-up Coppola. After all, Scorsese is now famous for films in that same genre, like Goodfellas and The Irishman. Plus, Robert De Niro has worked with both directors, so a kernel of truth might have provided the perfect environment for a mistaken memory to flourish. Or maybe the Tumblr users were just unwilling to admit they were wrong, and when the movie they thought they remembered so vividly didn't turn up a Google result, they simply gaslit the internet into believing them. Merriam-Webster called gaslighting the 2022 word of the year based on how often it was searched. I'll save you some time and just spell it out here. Although the term is used a lot these days, gaslighting refers to a specific set of behaviors beyond just lying. The word was coined after the play Gaslight, in which a man tries to convince his wife that she's insane by dimming the lights over time, but claiming that they weren't whenever she points it out. In this way, gaslighting refers to psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories. Tumblr users trying to convince each other over several months that a false memory was real by creating the narrative could be an example of this. Or perhaps the community was trolling. Trolling is an ironic humor tactic made famous by internet culture. In this example, it creates an in-group and out-group dynamic, where the in-group is anyone who gets that what the troll is saying isn't real, and the out-group consists of the poor saps who do believe it. It's a more extreme form of satire that pushes for as large of an out-group, in other words, naive believers, as possible. The Gongorov case could just be a big instance of this. In any case, all of this begs an interesting question. Can you be a fan of something that doesn't exist? You see, as Gongorov took off and more people got in on the joke, it developed a dedicated community of people critiquing it, recounting their favorite scenes, creating art and music, and discussing it with friends and family. All of this is consistent with fan behavior. Taking it one step further, the community became a fandom. They established a canon complete with characters and their backstories, a setting, and crucial plot moments. As we saw in the Fandom is Powerful video, fandom is a tool for community organization. But in this case, the community organized to create the fandom. Okay, but Gongorov isn't real. The Godfather fandom exists because the Godfather movies are real. Well, real in the sense that they exist. You can watch the films today in a variety of formats. It just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and film critics still discuss it today. But what if the movies disappear tomorrow, and no one could watch them ever again? People would still remember watching the movies, and the fans would mourn and probably gather to recreate the films themselves through recalling favorite scenes and making fan work. Eventually, they would have to convince folks who had never seen the movies in the first place that the trilogy existed. It would probably look a lot like the Gongorov fandom. So, again, I ask, can you be a fan of something that doesn't exist? Well, yeah, sort of. What makes this question difficult is the nature of fandom. When people become fans of something, naturally they want to discuss it and create fan works to express that love. By doing so, they can turn something fictional or made up into something with substance. For example, Trekkies came together to learn Klingon, thus making it a real language. In fact, the Klingon Language Institute has been teaching people the language since 1992. According to sociolinguist Alan Bell, it's helpful to qualify languages based on a set of criteria. Two of those, vitality and historicity, were achieved purely through fans' dedication. Vitality refers to the existence of a community of people who use the language, and historicity refers to how much those users feel a sense of identity and ownership over that language. If fans hadn't come together to learn Klingon, then it would not have met Bell's standards and may not have been considered a real language. Fans made Klingon real. In another instance, readers of Rainbow Rowell's novel Fangirl subsequently became fans of the fictional novel series in it featuring Simon Snow, which didn't exist for another 2 years when Rowell published Carry On as a standalone but canonical book. Now, the Simon Snow story is a trilogy with a dedicated fan base. Another example of this is with Hype Mania, in which people declare themselves fans of something that hasn't even been released yet, or even passionately defend that work, for better or for worse. Even I have been part of this phenomenon of liking something that doesn't technically exist. As a huge Space Dandy fan, I bought a fan-made t-shirt for the Dropkicks, the fictitious band that main character Dandy and his new friend Johnny create on a whim. It was a way for me to show my love for an underrated anime in a cryptic way because only other fans would understand the reference. So maybe basing the validity of a fandom on the tangible existence of the thing it loves is the wrong focus. After all, if it walks like a fandom and talks like a fandom, then it is one. Instead, let's focus on the power of fandom. Again, when people unite over the common love of something, they can literally create media out of thin air. Klingon could have remained strange subtitles on a screen, but fans got together to study and spread the language so that they could engage with their medium even more intimately. Similarly, Tumblr users are inventing Gankarov with the power of imagination, and some have already joked, or promised, that they would actually create the film. Whether or not Gankarov will exist, the love for the pretend film is real, and it's forcing us to adapt our definition of the words fan and fandom to be more inclusive. Fans and media have always influenced each other, even more so in the age of the internet. So the better we are at acknowledging the power of fandom, the better we get at treating everything like literature. If you haven't already, check out my short on the power of fandom to hear about how the word evolved and how fan behavior is recognized around the world. It'll give you some good insight into this video. And as always, stay lit.